Welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast, where it's all about fixing your relationship without your man's conscious effort so that you feel desired, taken care of, and special, even if your relationship feels completely hopeless. I'm Laura Doyle, and today we're talking about how to get more couple time with a workaholic. My guest, Sandy, was so miserable and lonely in her marriage, she would sit in her closet and cry every day. Finally, she got her husband to agree to go to marriage counseling, but she was mortified when he blew up at the counselor, saying it wasn't helping them at all. She felt hopeless and worried that he would always be resistant and harsh to her. But today, her husband takes her on trips where he treats her like his girlfriend, and he helps around the house like never before. She describes their relationship as life-giving, and she says it's even more fun than when they were dating. She's going to describe how she did it. The worst relationship advice of the week award is about how boundaries are supposed to work, but really don't at all. All of that's coming up. But first, let's talk about how to get more couple time with a man who works too much. It's lonely to be married to a workaholic. If he's not at work, he's sleeping or working from home, or he's too tired from working so much to be much fun. He neglects not just you, but also the kids. And you feel like a single mom going to get-togethers without him, always for the same tired reason. He has to work. If only you could get him to spend more time with the family. Well, you can. Here are 4 ways to inspire a workaholic to linger and lounge with you. Number 1, be happy to see him. It can be hard to get happy when he's home well after dinner and the kids are in bed again. But if he comes home and your face is sour and the air is thick, it's not going to inspire him to want to come home earlier the next night. Quite the opposite. Imagine he's getting affirmed and respected at work for his accomplishments. And then when he comes home, he's in the doghouse. Where will he want to spend more time? Well, exactly. I know you want him to come home earlier, and being happy to see him at 11 p.m. when you want him to come home at 6 p.m. seems counterintuitive, to say the least. But if you smile when he walks through the door and he knows you're happy to see him, he'll associate being home with feeling good. That will inspire him to be more efficient at work so he can be home more. You may not be convinced about that, I realize, but if the approach you're using now isn't working, what could it hurt to experiment? Just see what happens. Number 2, make him feel successful as a husband. Let's say your husband mostly feels competent and capable and appreciated at work. Now, let's suppose he feels respected there, right? How does that compare to how he feels at home? If you're anything like I was, and you remind him he's not keeping up on getting the trash out, or question the way he handled that incident with his mom, or let him know you're not happy with having to do everything, well, that leaves him feeling profoundly disrespected. And for husbands, feeling disrespected feels the same as being unloved. Feeling unloved is something most people try to avoid. Therefore, consider learning how to be respectful and then putting your attention on your own happiness. I know that sounds nutty and maybe even selfish, but it turns out the way to make a husband feel successful is to make yourself happy. Otherwise, how will you be able to do number 1, right? To start, think about what's gratifying and frivolous and fun for you. And now, go do it. He'll pick up on those happy vibes, and they'll be like a magnet to steal for him. He may even do what Patty's always working husband did when she started making herself happy, and he saw her smiling so much more. He left work early and took her on a picnic. Number 3, make him feel successful as a dad. It's agonizing to see your kids missing their dad, and that makes you want to tell him about how much he's missing and how hard it is for them. But once again, that focus is on his shortcomings and not the fact that he's keeping everyone in Pokemon and Disney movies. Even if you work too, his work is contributing to the family's standard of living, and it helps to acknowledge and appreciate that. Plus, he probably does some things as a dad that you could also be focusing on. I know it's not as much as you want, but if he has ever helped with homework, he could be considered the homework hero, for example. Maybe that feels like a stretch, but why not stretch to reach if it would give your kids that home court advantage you're longing for them to have? Make a spouse fulfilling prophecy that he's a good dad and watch him live up to your words and come home more to be that dad you see in him. Number 4, honor your desires. You might think that your husband already knows what you want and he's just choosing work above spending time with you anyway. But consider the possibility that he doesn't know what you want. Not enough to make it so. Yes, he knows that you're unhappy, that he's always working or exhausted, but that doesn't give him the vital information he needs to make you happy. That just tells him what you're upset about. Complaining is not the same as expressing a desire that he could fulfill, which would give him the chance to be your hero. Let's say he did come home from work at a normal time. Would that make you happy? I know it would be one thing off your checklist of things that you're not happy about, and you might feel less lonely for sure. But would you truly be happy? Of course, it seems like you would. But that's why it's such an interesting question, isn't it? Is that what's standing between you and happiness? Because as you already know, your happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. It depends on how much you honor your desires. Your happiness depends on how much you let yourself wade into the waves at the beach or get the paint and the easel out, even though it's messy, or listen to your favorite music, maybe 5 times in a row, same song. If you knew what you wanted and you told your husband and he saw that he had a chance of making you happy, that could very well draw him home, no matter what's going on at work. Marta's husband had been a workaholic for their entire 15-year marriage. And although she said she was used to it herself, it broke her heart that the kids never saw their dad. She told me it was unlikely that he would ever change, but she decided to do the things I recommended anyway. And she started to be happy to see him when he came home from work, no matter how late it was when he came through the door. Isn't that what people who love each other do? As she got happy to see him, he got happy to see her. And because coming home was so pleasant, he started coming home earlier. They were even eating dinner together most nights. And then something amazing happened. Her husband decided to change jobs to find one that would allow him to spend more time with his family. That was pretty shocking to Marta and wonderful. But there's more. As long as he was changing jobs, Marta's husband decided to take the opportunity to take 6 weeks off between jobs. And guess what he wanted to do with those 6 weeks? He wanted to spend it with his family. Your workaholic guy will also respond to you differently when you go back to being the happy, respectful, pleasable wife you once were. If you'd like to be my guest on the Empowered Wife podcast and share about how you fixed a struggling relationship using the 6 intimacy skills, I would love to interview you. Just go to lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest to let me know that you are willing to make a big contribution to ending world divorce by telling your relationship story. I look forward to meeting you. That's lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest. My guest, Sandy, was so miserable and lonely in her marriage. She would sit in her closet and cry every day. Finally, she got her husband to agree to go to marriage counseling, but she was mortified when he blew up at the counselor, saying it wasn't helping them at all. She felt hopeless and worried that he would always be resistant and harsh to her. But today, her husband takes her on trips where he treats her like his girlfriend, and he helps her around the house like never before. She describes their relationship as life-giving and says it's even more fun than when they were dating. She's going to describe how she did it. Sandy, welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here, Laura. It's just such an honor to be here. So I've just so enjoyed you and your books and all that all that I have learned through your curriculum and through your coaching program. It's been amazing.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, I want to hear all about what things were like before. What was happening for you in the bad old days?
Well, it's kind of interesting. We had, when we first got married, things were fairly good. I mean, we had a good marriage. We loved each other. We were both go-getters, on top of the world, and started having kids shortly after we got married. We both came from large families. My husband's one of 11 kids, and I'm the oldest of 5. And we loved family. We loved children, and so we just thought, oh, let's just get after it. And at the same time, my husband was growing a business when we got married. He started off with a software company, and it was just he and a few employees. And it just started exploding and just got super busy. And he was working quite a bit, and I was working for my dad. And he had a nonprofit that I was helping to manage, and that was growing. And so we were both very, very busy. But things kind of just a few years after we got married, we started kind of coming at odds with each other when I realized that he was a lot different than me. He came from a large family, Irish Catholic, 7 boys, a wrestler, and my home I was one of 4 girls, and we had 1 brother, and it was more of a girls' home. And I just thought he was yelling at me all the time. And he would say, "I'm not yelling. I'm just talking to you. I don't understand why you think I'm yelling all the time." Well, in my brain, his intensity seemed like he was yelling. And I would start crying and say, "Yes, you are. I don't know why you're so upset. Why are you yelling at me?" And so we would have, tips like that, but we would make up and just go on our merry way. But the rug kind of got pulled out from under us, I would say, and things started taking a real downward spiral. Just over a period of a few short years, I lost both of our moms, my mom and his mom, within 3 months of each other from cancer. And both of them were young. My mom was 56, his mom was 63. And I loved them both so much. His mom was amazing. And it just was devastating. We had 4 young kids at that time. We were living at the hospital night and day. I was an emotional wreck. He didn't know how to console me or what to do. He was just, he would do the best he knew. He was a very caring man, but it was just like anything he said or did wouldn't console me. And then at around that same time, the software company sold that he was with. And we got a nice return from that. And he invested quite a bit of the money in various investments and really thought he was doing some smart investments. I mean, a few of them I was kind of like, I'm not sure, but most of them looked like very solid investments in properties and whatnot. And within a few short years of all during this same time of our mom's passing away and everything else, every investment went south. It was crazy. It was uncanny. And in a matter of a few short years, we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And all of a sudden, we're in a real financial bind, like really financial bind, to the point where I didn't know if even we'd be able to keep our house. And we had a beautiful home, and I was just devastated. So, and then he was traveling quite a bit for his work. He was traveling over 100,000 miles a year. And so I'm left at home with these 4 young kids, just feeling like my world is caving in. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to show my face in front of anybody. I'm like thinking, oh my gosh, I cannot believe we are walking through this. And I didn't know where to turn. We were pretty involved in our church, and my husband, because of the company he built, was very involved in the community. And so I didn't want to tell anyone. I knew people would talk, and I felt so alone. I was so alone. And I would sit in my closet every day just crying and crying and crying. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know who to talk to. And then the tension between us, because of all this, just started building. And the fear that just gripped my heart because of the losses and things we were going through was just super strong. So then I became overly controlling. I was already had a tendency of being controlling. I didn't realize how controlling I was until I read your book. But I started being controlling and critical and just letting him know, just constantly reminding him of the bad place he was putting us in because of the investments and the financial hardship. And we were struggling, and I was disrespectful. It was just not good. It was not good.
It sounds very, well, there were a lot of trials that kind of came up and walloped you as a wife, as a couple. So I can really hear the stress. And what was your marriage like at that time, like on a day-to-day basis?
You know, I would like to say it was decent, but now looking back, it was rough. I mean, he from the minute he walked in the door, I was resentful. I was frustrated. I was angry. I was angry at him. I would normally tell him everything that he had done wrong, from getting home too late, to not helping out enough with the kids, to not helping me enough in the house. And he just reverted inward. Like he, the phrase that men go into a cave, it was like he lived in a cave. He was here, but he just wasn't here. He would come home. He would interact with the kids and stuff a little bit, but then he would just go in his office and work until 11 o'clock at night, which would make me more frustrated because I felt like it just makes me want to cry when I think about it, because I felt like all he ever did was work, and that he didn't care about me, and he didn't know how to show love toward me. He was constantly trying, now that I understand that men were wired to make me happy, but everything he did it wrong. I didn't want him helping me with the dishes because I didn't like the way he loaded the dishwasher. He didn't help me do the laundry because I was afraid he was going to ruin the clothes. He was, working quite a bit and traveling a lot. So I didn't get his help around the house or in the yard or all that, all those types of things. And my kids were teenagers now at this point, and a couple of them, and I was the one that helped them drive. And I was frustrated because I had to teach them how to drive. He wasn't even around to help teach them how to drive. So I just found myself filled with resentment and anger. And I just let him have it. But the funny thing is, it's like I was deceiving myself. I always thought that I was nice. And I would try and do it in a nice way. But really, he was just being beat up. He was just being beat up, and he would just go to his computer and work and just stay busy and travel a lot for work. Laura, I even remember him coming home, and a couple of times from being on trips that were like 2 weeks long, and I'd go get him at the airport, and he'd get in the car. And instead of just greeting him and telling him how much I loved him and missed him, I would just start laying into him about everything that happened over the week and what I was going through with the kids and the issues I was dealing with and how I needed him around more, and just constant. I think, oh my gosh, I can't even believe he came home. I mean, how would you like to come home to that all the time?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you were so overwhelmed and so depleted. That's really all you had to greet him with at that point. And
I was exhausted. And part of my wiring, I guess, is, I was the oldest of 5 kids. I was given a lot of responsibility very young. My parents were very, very busy. I was babysitting from the time I was like 10 years old. Then I started working for my dad and running his company. And I hired employees, and to get in my early 20s, I was a make it happen kind of person. I was given all kinds of accolades and praise. The more I could handle, the more praise I got. So I just thought I was supposed to handle and do everything. And I did everything, and to the point I was exhausted.
And it seemed to you like the problem was that he was just gone too much and just working too much. And
Exactly.
that was the main thing, that he was a workaholic, sounds like.
Yes.
And so what did you do to try to fix the marriage?
Well, when I really came to the bottom of myself, I say, and I was in that closet crying every day and I didn't know where to turn. He knew I was in rough shape. Like he was concerned about me. And so I just begged him to go to marriage counseling with me, but I didn't have even the courage to pick up the phone to call the marriage counselor. I was like, you need to do it. I can't even do it. And so, plus part of that was my embarrassment too, because I felt like I had failed to have to go to marriage counseling like this.
Mm.
And so he called a mutual friend of ours that we knew did marriage counseling, and we started going to him. And of course, I just was just let out everything. It was my place to tell him everything my husband was doing wrong and how he wasn't around enough and how I needed more help, and just berated him, like you talk about in the counseling sessions. And this gentleman, he was really nice, but just more low key. And my husband I just remember after about 3 or 4 times of going, he got upset. Like he wasn't yelling, but he used a very strong tone in his voice. And he's like, you are not helping us at all. I don't even know why we are coming here. You are not helping us. I am not coming back. This has been a waste of my time and money. I was mortified. And then on top of that, I felt like it gave me more evidence of how this man was out of control and needed help.
That's right. I could totally see how that was. That just reinforced. Like,
harsh. He verbally, I don't want to use the word. He was never verbally abusive. He just would push back. He would push back strong. And he's a man, and he's a man's man. So he would like just. It was almost like put up his hand sometimes and say, "Stop! I'm not going to take that," kind of thing.
Yeah. And you might have felt like you were getting abused, even though, right? He was just trying to defend himself. It sounds
he was trying to defend himself. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this marriage counseling, that wasn't useful. It sounds like.
So then we went to another one.
Okay.
So then, I was like, well, I'm still needing help, and he needs to change. He needs to change so that this marriage can get better. And I remember thinking, there were days that I would just think, I can't go on anymore. I can't do this anymore. And I would even tell him that. Tim, I can't do this anymore. And he'd say, do what? He goes, do the marriage? Like, what can't you do anymore? Be a mom? What can't you do? Like, he'd say it just like that. What can't you do? And I'm like, I just can't do this marriage anymore. And he's like, well, do you want a divorce? And I was like, I don't know. I just know I can't do things the way they are and the way that we were doing it. But I knew in my heart, I really didn't want a divorce. I didn't want the embarrassment of a divorce. I didn't want to hurt my kids. I didn't want to drag them through that process. I would sit and think about it. And in the back of my mind, I'd go, okay, so if I got a divorce and I would leave him, then that guy would have issues and I am not perfect. And then chances are my husband, this is the honest truth. I cannot believe I'm even sharing this. I would think my husband, he's a pretty good man. He's pretty great. And chances are then someone would get him and I would look back years later and be really upset.
Wow. I love that. I love that perspective. So
I do these like scenarios in my head about it.
Yeah.
He's a pretty good catch.
Yeah.
Even though he was driving me nuts.
Right. So deep down, you knew divorce was not going to be your answer.
So we went to another marriage counselor, and we actually went 2-3 years. He was someone that my husband really respected. But once again, it got to the point where Tim asked, can we see each other separately? Because I would just get in there and unload. And Laura, I look back and I just cringe. I did not realize how disrespectful I was and how emasculating I was to my husband. And And at least this guy was pretty good and would kind of say, Sandy, you need to get all your words out, but we need to get back on track. But the problem is then he would give us assignments and I would want to make sure my husband did the assignment. So I was on his paper all the time. I was always on his paper. Did you get the work done? Hey, we have an appointment tomorrow. Did you do your part of the assignment? I did my part of the assignment. Did you do your part of the assignment? So, that didn't work either. And we ended up going separately to see him. And he really started working on me because he could see how wired-tight I was and the resentment and fear and all of that. So, and my husband went like 2 or 3 times and then he stopped. And then I was frustrated that he wasn't going more. This was a vicious cycle. It was just a vicious cycle. It didn't help at all.
Wow. And what kinds of exercises did the therapist?
Well, one thing he had me do was he could tell that I was really resentful and angry. And so he would say, Sandy, okay, what I want you to do is for the next couple of weeks, I want you to make a list of everything your husband does wrong. Every time you get angry and frustrated, just write it out so you can get it out. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's what I need to do. I need to just get it out, just get it all out. And so I think it was his way of me not taking it out on my husband. Well, what ended up happening is I would write down, oh, he did this, or he didn't hug me right, goodbye, or, just all the things that were bothering me, stupid little things, all the little stupid things. And I'd write it down and I started getting angrier and angrier. And after a couple of weeks, I literally remember thinking, this is the dumbest assignment. This is not helping me. I am so frustrated at my husband. This isn't helping me at all. There has to be something more than keeping track of everything he's doing wrong.
Wow. So you just had this awareness that you choosing that as a focus was not serving you at all. It sounds like.
Yes.
So wise. Even though an expert was saying this is how you improve things, you were like, no, this is not for me. It's not improving things. So was there ever a moment when you just thought, okay, we can't go on like this. Like this has got to change?
Yes, I do remember sitting at my kitchen table and I was staring out the window and just tears running down my face. We had just gotten in an argument. We had had a stressful morning because we were packing to go to Hawaii and it was our anniversary. And I was sitting there debating whether or not I was going to go. Our in-laws were there to watch our 2 younger kids. And I just thought, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't go on this trip. I'm just so done. And I ended up going. I was too embarrassed to stay. And the crazy thing is, one of the reasons why I think I was even debating whether or not to go is I had a girlfriend who had told me about one time they had a rough marriage. And she said that they were getting ready to go on a family trip and they got in a tiff just before it. And she said, I'm not going. And she didn't go. And I was like, yeah, more power to you. She's like, I put my foot down and I didn't go on that trip. Well, they're now divorced. And that didn't help their marriage at all. And so I remember thinking, maybe I just need to put my foot down and just say, I'm not going. But, I knew that I didn't want the marriage they had. And so I just went ahead and went. But at the same time, I was just reaching out for more. I knew there had to be more. I was reading every marriage book that I could get my hands on. And the only problem with reading marriage books is that once again, I didn't want it to be all about me changing. I'd want my husband to change too. And so I would read the books and then tell him how he needed to show up better.
That's what I used to do with the marriage books too. It says in this marriage book, you should be doing this or whatever.
Yes. And then I would try and get him to read the books as well.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how. And then I get so frustrated because he wasn't interested. And then I would say, all you're interested in is work and all,
right.
You could care less about our marriage and you need to invest more in relationship and being more present and all, just the whole thing.
Right.
Just the whole thing.
Oh my gosh. All right. So what happened?
Well, it was a friend of mine who actually went to Hawaii with us. She came home and somehow came across your book. She told me it was an interesting story. She was trying to find a book for a friend of hers who wasn't married, who needed help. And so she came across your book. She read it and it just was life-changing for her. So she brought it to me almost like in a brown bag. It was kind of funny. And she's like, Sandy, I came across this book. It's really amazing. I think you'll really enjoy this book. And she said, it just has helped me so much. And so I was like, okay, and I really respected her. So I'm like, yeah. And I think I remember opening it, thumbing through it, but at the time the title was the Surrendered Wife. And so I was I don't know if I need to be surrendered. And I've read every marriage book under the sun. And so I ended up putting that book back up on the shelf for a couple of months. And then I don't know. I think things just got desperate and I was lonely and I thought, I'm going to read that book. Just like that. I was like, I'm reading that book. And I got the book and I read the book in a matter of just a few days. I know I hear some people say they read it in a day. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. But I literally couldn't put it down. I read it in a few days and I got online and ordered every book you had. And even the book, what was it? As Good as It Can Get, or yeah.
Things look as good as you can stand.
I remember when I was reading that book, I was thinking, I had no idea that my husband wanted to make me happy. How did I not know this? And that I could be receiving and enjoying life and so much more than what I had been. I remember a huge eye opener was after reading the book going, oh my goodness, I'm so controlling. I didn't know I was controlling. How could I be the way I was and not know that I was so controlling? And then I started seeing that so much of my control was based in my fear because I didn't truly trust and I wasn't willing to release and relinquish control and surrender. And so it just, I read every book you had, and then I read it again. And then over a period of 7 years, I've probably read it 7 or 8 times. I needed to refresh myself every year to read it, to remind myself. I'd like fall back into the old ways and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I need to pull out the book again.
Yeah. And so when you found out, like you read, oh, my husband's wired to make me happy, did you even believe it?
I didn't. That's what was so crazy. And we were on a trip. It was the second time I had read it. And we were on a trip and I was reading it out at the pool. So I thought, I am going to test this. And so I said, honey, I really would love to get some water. And, I was really hungry. I said, I'm just so hungry. And he goes, oh, do you want me to go get you some food? Just like that, like real quick. Oh, do you want me to go get you some food? And I was like, no, he probably had done that 1,000 times before. But for some reason, I did not see it before. And I was like, oh my gosh, he wants to go get me food. So I said, that's sure. And he goes, well, what do you want? I'll get you anything you want. Like, I was like, what? And so then I would do things, little things over the next few months just to kind of test to see, does he really want to make me happy? And I would, oh, honey, and I wasn't being manipulative with it. No. But I would just be aware. I was trying to be aware of it. So, I'd say, oh, man, I'm exhausted. I think I'll do the dishes in the morning. Oh, I'll do the dishes for you. I was like, what? This is a man who probably for 30 years hardly touched a dish. Now, mostly because I didn't want him to.
He wasn't up to your dishwashing standards.
He did, yes. But then also I learned that I didn't need to control everything. And if the dishwasher wasn't loaded the way I wanted it to, it was going to be okay. They were still going to show up clean in the morning.
Yes. Yes. And so you kind of demonstrated to yourself, you got new perspectives, right? You started
Yes.
focusing
I
on
love that.
all the
I love
things,
that term.
right? He's like trying to make me happy, this guy. And so it almost seems like he had a personality transplant or something, right? Because he was now helping with the dishes. And
He was
so,
helping with the dish. Oh, yes, I think as I started implementing these skills, he started doing so many things that just shocked me. Like, not just the dishes, he started making me coffee every morning and bringing it to me in bed and giving me a kiss. Just so sweet. And I used to hear about husbands that would do that. And I'm thinking, over the years, I'd be like, oh my gosh, my husband never did that. I'd complain about how much my husband never did, what my husband never did. And he would help with, dishes. He'd help around the house without me even asking. He just started taking ownership of things. I think one of the big things, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead a little here, but when I had to read probably for 2 years, the chapter on relinquishing the finances. And because of my fear of control and everything, I was always afraid he wouldn't pay a bill on time and let things go. And he was a very capable man who ran a company, but yet I still had this underlying fear that, oh my gosh, maybe he won't pay this bill on time.
right.
And so I relinquished control of the finances. And I remember coming down to him, and I used to do a lot of the bookkeeping for his company as well. And so I remember coming down and just saying he needed a check or something done. And I just said, Tim, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. And he was like, well, what do you mean you can't do it? Like, he knew I was a capable person. And he's like, well, what do you mean you can't do it? I said, Tim, it's too emotional for me. And it was very, very emotional just because of things from the past and what we walked through. And finances were a very emotional thing for me. And I would tell him, clients that weren't paying on time, I'd always get on him that he wasn't collecting fast enough and stuff like that. It was just constantly on his paper. And so, and I saw that after reading your chapters on it, I saw that. And so I just said, I can't do it anymore. And he was like, what? And I explained to him, I said, I'm a lot more emotional towards finances and money, but you're very logical. And he is a very logical, and a former CPA. So, so that's what's so funny, Laura. That's what's so funny. And so I said, and he like over the next few days would ask me to do things, and I'd come back and say, Tim, I just can't. I cannot do it anymore. Like, emotionally, I knew I could not do it anymore. And crazy thing is, he was like, okay. And within a couple of months, he found this amazing bookkeeper who far exceeded my skill set. He got a new CPA who was amazing. He took ownership of the finances. It was almost like he just dove in 100% and just figured out everything and where we were at, and then started pouring into the business. And I asked him today, I said, okay, honey, and since I really started relinquishing control and putting all these skills in place, I said, how much has the business grown? And he said 684%.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And he's a CPA, knowing that he had it
down.
Yeah,
that's a very precise number, right?
He's like, honey, he goes, in 5 years, in less than 5 years, it's grown 684%.
Wow. And you asked it, like, you correlated it to you trusting him with the finances.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it sounds like he kind of corroborated that, because he was like, oh yeah, since I took over, it was this.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that must feel really great for both of you. Like, I mean, you're out of that felt a job that felt really burdensome, it sounds like.
Oh my goodness. It took such a load off of me. I mean, I still had fear around it, and spending money. I was always afraid of spending money. And so I would keep telling myself, it's okay. You're going to make it. You're going to make it. Sandy, I'd have to do a lot of self-talk. But it was crazy because he would just take ownership. He would say, you know what, Sandy, you have cooked all these years for all these kids. I was really big. I had 3 boys, all athletic, everything. So I'd work and then make all these big meals. And he goes, I don't want you doing that anymore. You don't need to do that anymore. I would say probably 4 nights a week, he takes me out.
Wow.
And then
Nice.
he takes me, and then we'll pick up stuff to go. He'll help me make dinner. Like it's crazy. I literally had no idea. I almost feel guilty because I feel like am I doing enough?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, compared to where I was at and how stressed out I was. But I just have learned to just receive it graciously. And it is amazing. I mean, I'll even say, honey, it's okay. I can make dinner. He goes, no. I don't want you doing all the mess. You do not need to do that. Let's go out. We'll just get, and I like good food. So it's not like, let's run to Chick-fil-A, which I love Chick-fil-A, but I don't want to eat at Chick-fil-A every night.
Right.
They're nice restaurants.
Nice. And so it took a little something to feel like you deserved that kind of treatment, it sounds like.
Yes.
How did you overcome that guilt?
That is a good question. I think the main thing was the self-care. The self-care was probably one of the hardest skills for me to implement, Laura. I was a make it happen woman. I prided myself in that. I prided myself in being a superwoman. And like I said earlier, I had a lot of praise and accolades from all that I could do and handle. And so I just loaded on me, and I loaded it on, and I loved the praise that came with it.
Yeah.
I was kind of addicted to it. And so when I first started reading about self-care, I was like, what? I thought self-care was so selfish. But I could see there was something to it. There was something more to it that I wasn't really understanding. And so I just decided, I'm going to practice that. I'm going to see. I'm going to try to do a few things because I never really had given myself permission to do self-care. It was almost like I was bad if I did it. It's crazy where I don't know where that's seeped in, but
I don't think you're the only one, though.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So one of the things I started to do was I joined tennis. I'd always wanted to really learn how to play tennis, and I joined a beginner's tennis lesson. I just Googled one day, beginner's tennis lessons. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do something for me that's kind of crazy that I normally would never do or give myself permission. And I remember driving to the tennis courts, feeling guilty about taking the time to do it. But I just thought, no, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. Well, the funny thing is, I really, really enjoyed it. I was having so much fun, great camaraderie with the other women and other people out there, connections. I was craving that. And I'm kind of an athletic person anyway. I didn't know because I didn't give myself that much permission to be super athletic, but I really realized I enjoy it. And I love the competitiveness of it. And so I would come home really happy and really full. And I loved how that was making me feel. So then I kept doing it. And then after I went through the lessons, I joined another group. And then after the other group, then I joined drills. And then after drills, I joined a USTA league. And all of a sudden I was just like, oh my gosh, I love this. And so much so that my husband came in one day and he goes, you were having so much fun in tennis. I'm going to join too.
Inspired him to pick it up also.
Yes. And, it was something he really needed as well. He really needed an outlet because he did work a lot. And oh my goodness, of course, he far surpassed me because he's so athletic and fun.
Aww.
But we do like a mixed doubles team now. And that's been another time of being able to implement the skills because you can't coach each other. I've tried and it didn't work.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So anyway, so, and then I joined the private coaching because I realized even with me and your book, that wasn't enough for me to really change the way that I wanted to change and to show up better. And it's like I would do things for a while and then I'd fall back into my old ways. And I know I'm a mere mortal woman and I make mistakes, but I wanted accountability. I wanted help. I wanted to be challenged. And so I jumped into the private coaching, and Stephanie worked with me for 6 weeks just on self-care because I had done the tennis, but then I wasn't doing anything else. So just learning to implement self-care, learning to try and do 3 or 4 things a day for me. Even when I got my nails done, I used to, because I had to run in to get my nails done. And now I'm serious. I didn't relax with it because it was something that was on my checklist of things I had to do.
It's just another chore.
Exactly. So now I go in and I'm relaxed and I just enjoy it, and I don't work while I'm trying to get it done or right. So anyway, that was a huge, huge help. And then through that process, I saw such a transformation in my own life and in my heart that I decided to join the coach training. And I'm currently in the coach training program.
Love it. And so how was it different so you were a book reader for years and then you got coaching and now you're in coach training. What was the difference?
The community of women that I'm part of, it has just been absolutely beautiful. Just the accountability, the authenticity, the vulnerability, the help that we bring toward each other, even coaching each other has been so, so helpful and beautiful. And you see other women who are going through a lot of the same things that I have gone through, maybe in a different way, but dealing with the same type of issues, the same control, the same fears, the same disrespect, and wanting to show up better. And that has made a world of difference for me.
Wow, I love that. You also have implemented the practice of gratitude with your marriage, right? Tell me about that.
Yes. That one, my coach, Stephanie, really challenged me on that. And I had some past history behind it that was kind of an interesting layer. My mom used to actually speak quite a bit, and she would share her story on marriage of how she used to write a good report list for my dad. But they had a lot of issues in the background. And so for me, it was almost like, I will never do that. I'm never going to write that list. I don't want to be that person. And I don't know. I think it was just really hurtful for me. And so she really helped talk me through it. And I said, I'm going to do it different. I'm going to do a list of evidence of Tim's love for me. Every time Tim does something to show his love for me, I'm going to write it down. And so in the evenings or first thing in the morning, I would look back at all the things I noticed that Tim was doing to show his love for me. Laura, I was shocked. It makes me cry. I knew he was helpful and loved me and did things for me. But when I started keeping track every day of all the, making me coffee, running an errand, going to the grocery store for me, unloading the dishwasher and not even saying anything about it, taking me out to dinner, bringing me on a trip. I mean, all these things, I just started all these things. I would express a desire for something and it was like, oh my gosh, yeah, let me do that for you. And I just started listing everything he did. And so I did that faithfully for over 3 months. And we were coming up on our 32nd anniversary. And I thought, I just want to give him something special. I kept thinking in the back of my head, what can I give him besides just, a nice shirt or sweater or whatever? It's hard. What do you get a guy?
Yeah.
And so I was like, what can I get him? And all of a sudden it just popped in me. I want to give him the list that I've been collecting of all the ways he's been showing his love toward me. And so I had been keeping it on notes on my phone. So I was like, I can print it. I can print notes from my phone. So I went to print it. And when I went to print it, it was 58 pages. And I started crying. I was like, here is 58 pages of him showing his love toward me constantly. It was so moving. I had no idea. I couldn't tell when I would, just scroll down and write some more and scroll down and write some more. He had been doing those many things just to show his love for me. And so I printed it off. I put it in a binder and put a little sweet cover on it. And then at the restaurant, he gave me his gift, and it was beautiful. And once again, I'm just learning to receive so graciously. And he picked it out all himself. It was a piece of jewelry. I think in the past, I probably would have been like, well, I don't know, but I just received it and was like, I was shocked. I was like praising him in the restaurant. I can't believe you picked this out for me. You're amazing. I cannot believe how much you love me. And so then I gave him his gift, and he opened it up and he read it, and then he opened it, and I had on there evidence of all your love for me. And then I shared with him what it was, and he started crying in the restaurant. And we were in a nice restaurant, and he started crying, Laura. And he just looked at me and he said, this is all I've ever wanted you to know. How much I love you. He said, this is the most special gift you could have ever given me.
Oh my gosh.
It was powerful. It was, I can say even then, and our anniversary was this past 32 years past March, this past March. It's just, there's been a shift even with that, even in him. I feel like just feeling like he can really trust me more. He's just showing more love, just tenderness. It's just been beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
That is a beautiful story. And I give you all the credit for just having the willingness to try that, writing all that down, even though you felt like it was something you saw that didn't work for your parents. Yeah. But you're like, well, Mom, what do I know? I'm going to try this anyway. Right. So I just admire that. And then, did you feel vulnerable when you decided to share it with him?
I did. I was almost like, oh gosh, what is he going to think? And, but I just really wanted to share with him that I was acknowledging how he was really showing up and how much he was showing his love toward me. And so it just,
it was something
really moving.
It's something like, it sounds like you had trouble feeling his love early on. And now it's so undeniable.
Yes. And I think part of that was tied into, being worthy. It all ties into the self-care, being worthy of self-care, being worthy of receiving the love that he wanted to give me, feeling worthy of just embracing him and just all that he did for me. It just, I don't know. I did have a hard time receiving.
So it sounds like this journey was partly about feeling more worthy yourself.
Yes.
And has that made you feel more confident?
So much more confident. So much more confident. I would say probably 2 years ago, I couldn't have even done this podcast. I didn't have enough confidence to do it.
Oh, wow. Well, so now.
But it hasn't, even just as a woman, I feel such a weight off of me of just the exhaustion and just feeling overwhelmed. And I feel light and fun, and that I show up better. I feel more confident in people I'm talking with. It's just beautiful. It's even helped my own business of what I do. So, it's been amazing.
I love that. All right. So what's it like in your marriage now? What are you guys up to?
Oh, Laura, it's better than I could have ever imagined. And I don't say that lightheartedly. It really, really is. It's fun. It's light. It's full of adventure. Just this last year, and we're right into, I don't know, November. Yeah. We've already been on 6 beautiful trips this year that I have to watch expressing desires because it's like he tries to make them happen. I'll say, oh gosh, I really would love to go to the beach. And he's like, okay, well, why don't we go to the beach next month? I think I can make that work. I'll look at my schedule. And then all of a sudden, the next thing I know, he's booking a vacation to the beach. So, so we've been on 6 just really neat, fun trips. And like I said earlier, he just loves to treat me. He loves to take me out. He bought me my car that I really, really loved and wanted for a couple, 2-3 years. Didn't expect it. And he found it. He worked the deal. In the past, I would have been the one scrambling to try and find it. I would have been the one trying to work the deal. I came and just was relaxed. I didn't have to do the negotiations at the dealership. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Why did I think I had to control everything? I'd much rather show up like this.
Yeah.
It takes so much stress off.
And it just must make you feel so good to just be like the princess who just gets to show up and drive the car that your dream car instead of. And this is the workaholic guy that's taking you on all these trips, these getaways.
Yes. That's so crazy. Yes. Yes, good point.
Wait, so is he still a workaholic, would you say, or?
He works very hard, but he's really setting up his business where he has a great management team. Our son is working with him now, and he really trusts our son. So he's putting a lot off on him. And he said he's trying to get the business to where he does not have to show up, and it still is running. And he's practicing it, and we're doing things, and it's so much fun.
That's really right. So no more working in his office till 11 at night.
No.
Wow. And it sounds like he's spending a lot of time with you, all these dinners and those trips and stuff, right? So it's not like you're not lonely because he's working anymore.
No. If anything, I'm almost like, okay, honey, I think you should go to the office. I just need a little space. No,
right, when you have an alcoholic, you might not. Yeah, you might want to just. Yeah, okay, I love that. But
he loves being around me so much more. I mean, it feels weird to say that, but he really does. I can tell. It used to be that he would go into his cave and go into his office and work and push away and was resistant and I was prickly all the time. It was like he just didn't want to be with me. And so he loves being with me, loves it. He walks in the door and hugs me. He used to walk on the door half the time, still on the phone, and walk straight into his office at the house.
Wow. So what's your tip for a woman who is where you used to be and her husband's always working and she feels alone and lonely and overburdened, overwhelmed, and she feels like she can't, but she doesn't really want a divorce either, or maybe she kind of does, but she would really rather have what you're describing, where you take these trips together and he wants to be around you and you feel so loved. What's your best tip for her?
I would say the best tip would be to really pour into developing herself with these skills, with the 6 intimacy skills. It works. Don't try and change someone. Don't try and get them to become different. Just work on yourself. And the work of yourself, when you show up different, causes change. And then to join the Laura Doyle community, highly, highly, highly recommend it. I used to say I was a Laura Doyle closet follower for 7 years, read the book, would kind of, would go through your webinars and everything you do. And I was kind of afraid to dive in. And I finally decided, no, this has had such an impact on my life. I need to dive completely in 100%. And I had no idea in doing that how much the community that you have created with the women that you're surrounded with, the coaches, how much help it would bring to me and how much support. And so highly recommend just coming all in and joining the Laura Doyle community.
Wow, love that. And what would you say if you could go back in time and talk to Sandy from before when she was in her closet crying? What would you say to her?
Oh, I would say, Sandy, there's hope. There's hope. Don't give up. Keep searching and keep believing, because change will happen and things will get better than you could ever imagine. Just keep hanging on and keep searching. There's hope.
Wow. And one other question, I think, and your kids are all grown. Is that
My
right?
kids are all grown now. Yes,
Okay, they're all
from
grown.
31 to 22. Mm-hmm.
So, and how has this had any impact on them, do you think?
Oh my goodness, Laura, that makes me teary-eyed too, because over the last year and a half, all four of my kids have come to me at different times and told me how much I have changed and how much they appreciate the change, that they feel so safe around me. They share their heart with me. They just said, I'm more relaxed. I'm more fun to be with. It's been amazing. Even this last week, I was in Arizona with my sisters, and my sister just turned to me and said, Sandy, you are just so relaxed. I just love being with you. You have changed so much. I'm like, oh my goodness, what a testimony to the skills and what this will bring in your life. And I didn't realize that I was showing up. So I would want to say kind of high strung.
Yeah.
Just, yeah.
And what it must have just been so gratifying to get those acknowledgments from your four kids and your sister that you are a changed woman. You're a transformed woman.
Transformed woman.
And it sounds like you're also feeling more loved by all those in those relationships as well.
Much more loved. I love, my boys are very special and they love to bless their mama. And so I'm just so grateful, and so grateful to be able to even receive their love. And now that they're adults, not try and change them, just acknowledge them, and also saying, I hear you, when they're doing things that maybe I'm a little bit like, should they be doing that? I hear you, because they're going to figure it out. They're the experts on their own life. And I love that saying. They're the experts of their own life that you say in your books.
I love it. Well, big congratulations to you, Sandy. You are such an inspiration. Well done for changing, change. I feel like the mission to end world divorce always starts in our own marriages, right? That's the first place where we have the most power to do something. And you have used that power so wisely. You've used your influence so wisely. It's such a transformation. It's just, it's a beacon of hope for what's possible for everyone who's listening.
Amen. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing the whole story with us.
Thank you, Laura. I so appreciate being on. So it was an honor.
If you'd like to be my guest on the Empowered Wife podcast and share about how you fixed a struggling relationship using the 6 intimacy skills, I would love to interview you. Just go to lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest to let me know that you are willing to make a big contribution to ending world divorce by telling your relationship story. I look forward to meeting you. That's lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest. It's time for the Worst Relationship Advice of the Week award.
It's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice. Yeah, it's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice of the week.
And the advice I find most irritating this week was sent to me by a good friend who could not wait to share this with me because she knew I would get so bent out of shape hearing it and explode. And she was right. It is breathtakingly bad. So thanks for sharing, my friend. And the advice is from a self-described modern mental health therapist who says in an Instagram story that, quote, when people set a boundary with you, it's their attempt to continue the relationship with you, not an attempt to hurt you. And she whispers that last little bit, which makes it extra repulsive for me. Like, that's a secret she's going to share for the uninformed person who's just being too sensitive and getting all offended by a boundary. Like, duh, you don't even get it when someone's just taking care of themselves. Well, the only reason you'd need to say you shouldn't get offended by a boundary is because boundaries are so flippin' offensive. And I'm offended right now just thinking about them. But you might be thinking, Laura, everyone knows you have to have boundaries in relationships or you'll just be a doormat and everyone will just walk all over you. Well, you could argue that, if someone gets offended, that's their issue, not yours, right? Setting a boundary is just speaking up for yourself, right? Let's dig into that. Let's say you were going to set a boundary by saying, if you don't stop speaking to me that way, I'm going to leave, for example. And I know that boundary example sounds dreadful. But this is an example of a proper boundary I got from the modern mental health therapist. So, what's the meaning of if you don't stop speaking to me that way, I'm going to leave, right? Let's just pull that a little apart because she's saying, you're saying, the boundary setter is saying, you're speaking to me in a way that is bad, wrong, rude, inconsiderate, abusive, something like that, right? Which is a criticism. That's just downright critical and likely hurtful to the listener. Yes, it is. And wrapped into this yucky sentence is also a threat. If you don't stop being verbally abusive, I'm going to leave you. Now, the word boundary, to me, just seems like a not so secret euphemism for criticizing someone and giving an ultimatum. I call them boundamatums. And ultimatums, they seem seductive. I know. I used to use them all the time. But they are no way to improve the intimacy and the connection in your relationship. They usually make people want to do the opposite of what you're trying to get them to do because no one wants to be manipulated like that. But worst of all, they also make you feel very undignified. At least they did with me. So I can certainly see where someone might not see this boundatum as an attempt to continue the relationship. Now, it might be that the threat is just an empty threat, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, most people don't react well when they're threatened, right? At all. So if a mere mortal man who has just been criticized for talking the wrong way and threatened with his wife leaving responds by being a defensive jerk, is that really the time to say to him, well, just, knock that off, buddy, because it's her attempt to continue the relationship with you, not an attempt to hurt you. That just seems very unaccountable. And the modern mental health therapist adds this, which makes me want to scream into a pillow. If someone can't accept your boundary, it's validation that the boundary was necessary. If someone can't accept your critical ultimatum, it means you were right and there's something wrong with them, right? It just makes me even more outraged than I already was, because with this approach, you can pretty much guarantee that the husband is not going to say something to convey acceptance. That much seems obvious, quite the opposite, which she may then think, well, because of this super stupid advice, that proves there's something wrong with him. Just makes me want to hit a volleyball so hard that it lands in the next county. I plan to do that later. So if attacking the other person and making threats is not the way to make your marriage more connected or make it last, then how do you take care of yourself in a relationship? Well, that's what the 6 intimacy skills are all about. That's what we talk about in this podcast every single week, is a dignified way of truly honoring yourself without jumping onto someone else's paper to tell them what they did and what they should do instead. That's never going to work. Of course, every wife deserves kindness and tenderness, but I have yet to hear a boundary that will help you create that. And so for those reasons, the advice, when people set a boundary with you, it's their attempt to continue their relationship with you, not an attempt to hurt you, is the very, very, very worst relationship advice I've heard all week. Listen and subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. Next week is the first week of the Man Panel, where I interview the husbands of women who mastered the 6 intimacy skills. We're going to get to hear their side of things. In the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that yesterday, I asked the woman at the deli, "What is that behind the broccoli?" And she said, "None of your business."